Welcome back to segment 2 of Citizens Forum. I'd like to start off by thanking all the fantastic volunteers and people that work on the show every week. A little bit of magic happens here every week in the studio where a handful of people really do a lot of work to bring this to the public. So I have with me today Will Weigler. Will is an author. He's a producer, a playwright, a storyteller, and Will has written a new book. It's called The Alchemy of Astonishment. It's a great name, The Alchemy of Astonishment. It's published by UVic, and Will's going to have his book launch on April 26th at the First Metropolitan Church here in Victoria. So welcome to the show, Will.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
So I have one question for you that
All right.
I wrote down. Why did you call your book The Alchemy of Astonishment?
That's great. Well, partly to poke fun at myself.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, the alchemists were this team of dedicated scientists who felt that if they could just work hard enough, they could figure out the formula for how to turn lead into gold.
Yeah.
So my book is about how if you've got a story that you want to tell, something that's important to you, sure, you can stand up and tell the story, but I'm offering a sort of a way that you can turn it into a performance so that the whole audience will gasp, will have an epiphany about it, will suddenly come to understand in a deeper way what your story means.
Okay.
So just like people thought the alchemists were delusional, I have figured a lot of people will think that I'm delusional, sort of being so audacious to think you can come up with a formula for producing epiphanies in the audience. But
okay.
I did it. I actually did it.
You mixed something together and it seems to work.
Yeah.
So what is it? How does it happen?
Well, I'll tell you how I got there.
Okay. I'm rushing a little bit.
It's
here.
fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I did this as part of my PhD
Yeah.
at UVic. And for my research, I wrote letters, good old, stamp on the envelope letters to everyone I could think of who'd seen loads of plays in their lives, loads of theater. So theater critics in all the major cities in Canada and the US and Western Europe. Book authors on theater professionals. And I wrote a letter and I said, listen, this isn't a survey, I've just got one question. In all the plays that you've ever seen in your life, has this ever happened to you? You've been at a show and one moment in the play, suddenly the whole audience gasps and you feel like you understand something. If so, would you tell me what it was? What happened at that moment and what was the play and where did you see it?
Oh,
I got about 90 replies from people who should have been way too busy to write to me saying, I'm so glad you asked. Yes, I treasure it. It was like 1965 in Rio or Minneapolis or Toronto. And this is the moment that I'll never forget. And then I looked through the archives up at UVic, online and in books, to see if there was any record of somebody else who had seen that show and also written a review or an article. Whenever I found somebody else, almost always they talk about the same moment in the play. So almost 100 stories of these incredible, breathtaking moments, and I looked at them all, I analyzed them to see if there was any pattern. And go figure, there was. There was one thing all of them had in common. And I was able to reverse engineer how a moment like that can produce an epiphany, and that's what I put in the book. That was The Alchemy of Astonishment.
Okay, so we're gonna have to buy the book. You have to get it's be money well spent, because I tell you that Jack and I and many of my friends over the years, on our show and whatever we're doing as activists, always felt we always had a good message and we were on top of the facts and we pretty well knew what was happening. And as we delivered our message, you could sort of see the eyes glazing over. They were sort of interested, but not really. And I knew we weren't capturing their imagination, let's say. And so we've always wondered how to get that message across.
Well, and I think it's appropriate for the work that you're
Yeah.
really interested in, of social change. Because as a director, the work that I do isn't often with professional actors. I work with people in communities to help them tell the stories that matter to them.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really good at this. I can hear people's stories and think, right, I know how to stage that because that's what I do.
Yeah.
But it kind of takes away their power over their own stories. So the idea for building this was to develop a way to teach them how to do this, give them a vocabulary, so that when I work with them, it's not me as kind of the arranger.
Yeah.
We have a common vocabulary we can talk about. And that brings me to the other part of the book. Of course, the book comes, you can buy it by yourself, and it's full of all the stories that I got from people But I also developed this really cool deck of cards working with a local designer, graphic designer named Kip Maloney. The idea was that they're built like a deck of tarot cards.
Just tip them, let's
With
go
5
like
different
that.
suits.
That's good. And how does that work?
The idea is that all the different staging strategies in the book, there's a card for each one. There's 5 different kind of ways of creating these with variations. So it's like a flashcard.
Yeah.
You teach this one, and on the back it describes how it works. And at the bottom
Okay.
it has a challenge for how to put that into a scene or a song.
Okay.
So we go through them like flashcards, and people learn the different vocabularies, and the pictures help them remember which one is which. So once they've got a handle on it, then we say, okay, what's the story you want to tell? And they're flipping through the cards and think, right, okay, I can use this one and this one and this one.
That's ingredients in this story.
Those are the way to stage it.
Oh, I see.
Here's the material of the story. Here's the story itself. But how do I put it on stage? I'll use this card to stage it, and I'll say to them, oh, I see you're going with this one. How could you dial that up a little bit? And what about using this one? And they'll say, right, I see where you're going with that. And now we're making it together.
Now, could you do that if you were doing other types of art?
Absolutely. Well, certainly anything related to performance.
Yeah.
I mean, writing has its own skill.
Yeah.
Drawing, art making. But as far as performance, whether it's a sermon or a presentation of any kind, all of this is applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, like, did you ever see Dinner with Andre?
Oh, you bet.
And now this is the epiphany moment for me. And the guy's talking to Andre. I can't remember the other guy. And his name. And he says, well, it's like we built this prison. Like in New York City is like a prison. But we're the prisoners, but we built our own prison. And when he said that, I just had one of those moments. Like, wow, we are building our own prison. That's our problem here. We have to not build this prison, take these walls down and whatever, and allow other things to happen. So I'm sure that was well written.
And that was one of your moments, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so many other things happened in that movie.
And yet it's just 2 fellas sharing a dinner.
Yeah.
Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the way it's filmed, you feel like you're right there with them.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah. And we rewatched it about a month ago, and it was even better. Some young person I was talking to said, "Oh, you got to watch Dinner with Andre." I said, "Oh yeah, I saw that in about 1980."
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, we watch it now. It's even more relevant, And obviously, it's because he had those moments.
These moments stay with us, and that was the exciting thing, to not just kind of pull something out of the air, but really look at people who said, this is the thing that changed me, that opened my eyes. And like I said, to reverse engineer those moments. And so I'm so eager to share this with people, both people who are just curious about theater, to say, how does that work?
Who have you worked with? What projects have you had that you say this has been applied?
Well, my field test after I did the PhD was a project called From the Heart, Enter into the Journey of Reconciliation. Yeah. And it was staged up at Uptown Mall. They very graciously gave us 14,000 square feet of open space that hadn't been leased. And we brought in hundreds of old doors and windows and fabric and trees. We built a labyrinth that took an hour and a half to walk through.
Oh, that's what you mentioned before the show.
So what we did is I worked with people in the community, in the Victoria community, who were not Native, not First Nations. Yeah. And we asked them to think about the stories that had opened their eyes. You're coming along as a Canadian, and then you read a story, you hear a story, you experience something, and suddenly you realize the impact of the legacy of colonialism. It opens your eyes. Yeah. So I taught them the cards, these cast members, and they turned that story of theirs into an incredible piece of performance.
So you can walk through the labyrinth.
And meet all these performance pieces. And finally, at the end, after an hour and a half, you get to the heart of the labyrinth. Instead of a minotaur who's going to eat you, you're met by a woman who says, could I offer you a cup of tea? And we had this salon where people could sit and drink tea and talk.
Yeah.
So actually, one of my books is called From the Heart, Enter into the Journey. It's called How 100 Canadians Created an Unconventional Theater Performance About Reconciliation. So it tells the story of how we did it, really as a model for other Canadians to pick it up and
Well, it is a burden that we carry, and
it's a responsibility that we carry.
It's like we're the products of colonialism. We arrived. We're sitting in our houses on native land. Yeah. It's hard to get around that fact, And although we spend most of our time trying to forget about it, but that's not healthy.
Well, and the idea of the show is not to say, oh, let's wallow in guilt. Let's say, this is the moment that opened my eyes, and I invite you, the audience, to kind of see what moved me, what shifted my understanding, in the hopes that perhaps you'll see that too. And so, anyway, it was a test of this theory that I developed, and it was off the charts. It won the award for Best New Play of the Season by the local critics.
Wow.
Sold out 20 shows. We had actually 120 performances because there were 6 per night.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a real validation that this Alchemy of Astonishment really works.
Yeah, I mean, it's for, I think for everyone, it helps us to maybe even though I intellectualize. You see, I intellectualize. So yeah, I'm hip. I'm hip, you know, I'm have a big heart, and I'm doing all the right things. But am I really? Or am I doing little tricks to block out the things that are a little inconvenient to me, you know? And maybe if I thought about it more, I might have to change my life more.
And if you could turn that into performance to share with other people, they might say, oh, actually, that's true of me too, and then we're on to a conversation.
Yeah, and it's really okay to change. That, you know, every time a pretty big fact arrives, like that in Dinner with Andre, when the guy's talking about building the prison, that was a pretty big one for me, because all of a sudden I had to change almost everything. Because it was a fact that I was just participating and putting these walls up. Although they were the walls of my choosing, I thought, okay, these are good walls. And I didn't realize that.
Well, that's the marvelous thing about this kind of theater. D.H. Lawrence once said that people aren't afraid of new ideas. They can pigeonhole new ideas, but no one can pigeonhole a real new experience. And when you're sitting in a performance and you have that experience, it's very difficult to go back to the way you used to be.
And you remember. I mean, I remember an experience forever. I'll recall it, something from childhood.
Oh, yes.
And it's just like, there it is. I remember how that went down. I never understood it, maybe for 30 years. But because it's come back into me, and I reprocessed it, and I kind of accepted it, it allowed me to understand it.
It's part of our humanity. It's part of what makes us humans. So.
Well, that's fantastic, Will. See how fast 13 minutes go by?
Well, by all means, the book launches on April 26th at First Met Victoria.
First Metropolitan Church.
On Quadra at Balmoral.
Balmoral.
Up the front steps. We start, the doors open at 7, and we start at 7:30, and you're all welcome to come. It's free. And
well, I really recommend that everybody goes and hears more about this. It's a fantastic idea.
Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, Will.
All right.
So that completes segment 2 of Citizens Forum.